It was the seventh Christmas. In the little village of Nazareth, all the children, all except one, had awakened that morning quite unexcited and without any thought of presents. The grown people went to their work as usual. No one felt any kindlier than was ordinary, and no one said or even remembered that 7 years ago today, Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Had you walked down the narrow streets of that quiet village, you would never have guessed that it was the morning of the seventh Christmas. Even in the carpenter's shop, where the little Jesus lived with his father and mother, they seemed to have forgotten. And perhaps his father had, for bread was hard to earn. But his mother had remembered, and on this day of all days, she pondered in her heart the wonders that were foretold of her little son on the night of his birth. And all day she watched longingly for the angels to return. Even though she had remembered it was his birthday, she was ashamed to own it, for she had no present for him. There was scarcely enough food in the house. And so when the only child in Nazareth, the only child in the world who really knew that it was Christmas, had awakened that morning, it seemed to him that the world didn't care. At first he was very disappointed, but when he saw the sadness in his mother's eyes, he tried to sing to make her glad. Something was sure to happen before the day was ended. Wonderful things had always happened on his birthday. 2 years ago, a shepherd came all the way from Bethlehem, a 4-day journey, bringing a tiny lamb. And long ago, so long that he couldn't even remember, someone had given him 3 golden caskets. His mother had taken special care of these caskets, but had never let him look inside, nor had she ever told him their story. His father, Joseph, had been offered great sums of money for them, but even though they were very poor, his mother had refused to sell. All day long, he waited and watched for the unexpected to happen. As he helped his father around the carpenter bench, he watched his mother seated in the doorway, clad in a striped robe with a white linen shawl around her shoulders. And every time a camel train shuffled by, stirring up the dust on the road to Damascus, he would hear the coins on her forehead jingle. She was watching for something too, but what? Jesus wondered. The day dragged on. There was no midday meal. His 7th birthday, and no one had remembered. But what did a little boy's birthday matter when times were so hard in Nazareth? It was winter. The flowers had perished from the fields. The brooks were white with dashing water, and there was a bleak look everywhere, and work was scarce. Younger carpenters were constantly passing by with the caravans on the way to the coastal cities seeking jobs. They were willing to work for the smallest hire, but Joseph could not compete with them. His fingers had grown stiff, and he could no longer stoop and pick up the tools as he once did. And many times they'd call out to him, "Hi, friend Joseph, thou wast once a good carpenter before thou didst journey into Egypt. But the hot roads robbed thee of thy strength. If thou hadst only stayed in Nazareth." And before he could turn his head away, the boy would look up into his face. "Why, Father, why didst thou not stay in Nazareth? And did I go with thee into Egypt? And was it there that they gave me the golden caskets?" But Joseph would only shake his head. "Nay, my lad, perchance it was all a dream. And some day when thou art a man, thou wouldst laugh at me if I were to try to tell thee now. And so it had gone on. And as Joseph's strength had failed him, they had grown poorer and poorer, until now, on the morning of the 7th Christmas, they had no food in the house. All day long Joseph had worked on the ox yoke, trying to finish it, that they might have money by night to buy bread. And all day long Mary sat in the doorway, gazing up and down the sunlit village street, watching and listening. At times she would turn her eyes into the shop. Joseph, did the angels really sing glory to God in the highest? Or was it all a dream? It couldn't have been, because the shepherds told the same story, and they wouldn't have dreamed it too. But he answered as a man who was sure of nothing. But the gifts from the east, Joseph, the golden caskets, they are real. We still have them. Ah, yes, Mary, they are real and worth a king's ransom. Merchants coming down from Damascus would pay great sums of money for them. And I'm so weary. I can't work much longer. If thou would only consent to sell. But she stopped him with sorrowful eyes, the soft, dark eyes of a woman who'd lived a lifetime of loneliness. A king's ransom. And shall we sell the ransom of our king without his ever knowing? And she turned her eyes back down the little street, still watching, still desperately hoping. He should be great. He should sit upon the throne of David. He should rule over all the nations. That's what the angels and the rich strangers and the shepherds had proclaimed of her little son on that night of his birth. But now it was as though with his birth the clouds had sealed the stairways to heaven, and even God had forgotten. No wonder Joseph was half persuaded that all the prophecies had been imagined. To the 3 golden caskets Mary's faith still clung. Messengers might come riding in from Jerusalem at any moment to take her son away and crown him king. Far off down the road she would see the smoking wheels of chariots. She had the little robe ready, which she'd woven for him secretly in gold and silvery threads. But if they should come and find the casket sold, how would they know that Jesus was the king whom they were seeking? And yet Joseph was weak for want of bread. With the money that the merchants might pay, they could live a lifetime in plenty. As Mary watched him bending lower and lower over the carpenter's bench, she heard a stifled cry. I cannot, he muttered. The tools fell from his hands, and he swayed back and forth over the bench. Then, drawing his cloak before his face, he sank to the bed of shavings and slept. The little Jesus stood over him. He's weary, Mother. He must rest. Would that I were a man. I'd finish the ox yoke for him. Nay, my little one, thou art still just a child, and there's no bread in the house. Thou must wake him. At these words, the little boy drew himself to his full height and stretched forth both arms. And as he did, the shadow of a cross fell behind him. Mary closed her eyes and shuddered. She couldn't bear the sight of a cross. But the child, thinking she was cold, ran to her and drew her cloak around her shoulders. There, Mother, I will sit beside thee and keep thee warm and protect thee, because today I am nearly a man. Hadst thou forgotten something? This is my birthday. I'm 7 years old. Nay, my little one, I had not forgotten, and all day my heart hath ached for thee. I had hoped that thou hadst not remembered, because there's no present that I can give to thee. The little boy smiled and laid his cheek against his mother's breast. Quickly the memory of the cross faded, and he was again that tiny babe in her arms, with whom she had fled into a strange land, seeing nothing of the dangers that beset her on every side, because of the love and the hope and the faith that she had in her little son. Once more she cast her eyes down the little road, still watching for the smoking wheels of chariots and angels. But the road was empty, and the heavens silent. Slowly, like sheep, the stars came out. One by one, the lights in the windows were extinguished, and the rustling of curtains and the closing of doors could be heard. The chill of the eastern December night crept into the air. In the darkness at the back of the carpenter shop, Joseph slept. It seemed to Mary that in this shuttered world, all those faithful ones who had greeted her little son on that miraculous night in Bethlehem had forgotten, and she alone was left to worship. They came bringing him gold and frankincense and myrrh then. But now, glancing down, she saw his bright eyes gazing up at her through the darkness, and she remembered her own birthdays and the excitement that they brought. He must not be disappointed. She must give him something, but what? When they were so poor, she couldn't even give him bread to eat. Lest he should be cold, she spread her tent around him. Come, little Jesus, come close to me, and I will tell thee a story of a king who was born on the same day as thou. The child smiled through the darkness. A true story, mother? Yes, a true story, and so marvelous that if it were not I who told thee, thou wouldst not believe it. And then he remembered the words of Joseph. Some day when thou art a man, thou wouldst laugh at me if I were to try to tell thee now. And he sat trembling, for he knew that he was about to learn why they had taken the strange journey into Egypt. And if he listened closely, he might find from whence came those mysterious golden caskets which his mother would not sell for any amount of money. He nestled closer to his mother as she began the story. I, Mary, knew the mother of a king. Her lips trembled against his cheek, and her voice came tenderly. Doth it not seem strange, little Jesus, that I should know the mother of a king? Every morning and evening with the other village maidens, she would go to a well to draw water. And on the way they had to pass a carpenter's shop, and the carpenter would smile up at her. And then some days he would lay aside his tools and walk out into the road and gaze after her. And then there came a day when he took the pitcher from her hand, saying, "It's too heavy for thee." And from then on, every morning and evening, he carried the pitcher brimming full of water. But all this happened before the coming of the king, and is not what I had intended telling thee. Mary ceased. In the quiet of her heart, she was dreaming of herself, that part of the story. One evening when the air was filled with the perfume of flowers, she was sitting alone in a garden. In the stillness, she heard the fluttering of wings like the sound of a swallow darting. And with that sound there came a dazzling light. When she opened her eyes, she saw standing in the pathway before her an angel. an angel that had been sent to her from God. The child pressed against her eagerly. And did he tell her about the king, Mother? Mary laughed. Remembering had made her happy. Forgetting her poverty, she stooped and kissed the upturned face of her little son. Be patient, my son. He did tell her that she was to be the mother of a king, and that among all the women of the world she would be called blessed, because that king, when he was born, would be the Son of God and would bring peace and goodwill into the world. To be the mother of a king must be very blessed. The child spoke bravely. And then, what else did he say? Nothing. He just spread his wings and flew away till the sound of his going grew faint above the palm trees in the gold of the sunset. The next day the carpenter watched for her to pass, and when she did not, he went in search of her, and he found her still sitting in the garden, gazing straight before her. For, oh, my little son, as thou hast said, it is very blessed to be the mother of a king. But it's very terrible to be the mother of the Son of God. And when he asked her why she had not come to draw water, now even though he was a good man, he had never seen an angel. And when she tried to tell him, behind them in the darkness, Joseph stirred. I cannot, he muttered. In his dreams, he was still troubled because the ox yoke was not finished. But Mary turned and spoke to him through the darkness very gently, and sighing like a child, he ceased his mutterings and slept. She turned her face back into the eager eyes of the little boy. And because he was a very good man, my son, he soon came to understand. It was the winter before the coming of the king that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that every man should go each to his own city to be taxed. The carpenter closed the shop and bought an ass and set the mother of the unborn king upon it, and together they journeyed to Jerusalem. And there through the rose gardens of Jericho she traveled, till on the fourth day, just as the sun was setting, Jerusalem blazed up before them like a golden temple. Ah, she sighed, it's here that he will be born and come back to be crowned. But Jerusalem was crowded, and the carpenter had to go on into Bethlehem seeking lodging. He went from door to door, only to be told, there is no room. Finally, the innkeeper said, in yonder cave in the side of the rocks is the king's stable. Thou mayest stay there. And the little donkey turned its head toward the cave, the only open door in all the world to the mother of an unborn king. And now, my little son, there is so much to tell, but thou art still a child and couldn't understand. Some day when thou art older, I will tell thee more. Slowly the little boy lifted his arms and, drawing his mother's face close to his lips, whispered, Hail Mary, blessed art thou among women. Thou, she peered at him through frightened eyes. Little Jesus, hadst thou already guessed? It was as though beneath the gay seriousness of his childhood, he had always known that he was the Son of God. But the earthly motherhood in her shrank away from it, just as she had shrunk from the cross, because it made him so little hers and so largely God's. She couldn't go on with the story. She stopped. But after a while, the child broke the silence. Mother, please tell me the story. You promised. Yes, I promised. And today thou art 7, and I have no present for thee. It was growing late as we climbed the hill toward Bethlehem, and far away in the clouds, like a white palace, hewn from the moonlight, it shone. Kindly beasts made room for us. And there, on just such a night as this, thou who shalt be the ruler of all the world, was born. And I wrapped thee in swaddling clothes and laid thee in a manger. In a manger, because there was no room for thee in the abodes of men, no room for the Son of God. But come, little Jesus, when I hold thee thus, I can believe that I, Mary of Nazareth, am rich and blessed. For 7 years, as many as thou art, I have kept silent, but now I will tell thee. There were shepherds abiding in the fields of Bethlehem, watching over their flocks by night. And lo, an angel of the Lord appeared before their flocks by night, all seated on the ground. The angel of the Lord came down, and glory shone around. And glory shone around. Fear not, said he, for mighty dread has seized their troubled mind. multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and singing glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And no sooner had they gone than a great clamor of trumpets rose upon the night air. Joseph moved out from the cave and looked down toward the city gates, and there he saw a great train of camels, caparisoned in purple and gold, and around each neck there hung a bell that tinkled, and the men riding the camels were waving lighted torches. So great was the company that it spread like a river down the hillside toward the eastern gate. At its head rode 3 kings in shining crowns, and their men were pounding upon the doors, demanding in loud voices, "Where is he who was born the King of the Jews? We have seen his star, and we've come to worship." And while they yet spake, a star was let down from heaven and hung like a lantern over the cave where thou wast lying. When the 3 kings saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy, and made haste to dismount from their camels. When they came inside the cave and saw thee lying in my arms as I sat among the oxen, they fell upon their faces and worshipped thee. One was a boy, smooth of face and ruddy of countenance, and one was a man in the power of his strength, sun-tanned by the desert and black-bearded, and one was as white as snow, and so old that his voice was like a reed shaken. They came bringing gifts to thee, and each man took from his treasure a golden casket and laid it at thy feet. And here Mary grew sad again. Remembering had made her sad. Slowly, one by one, the tears ran down her cheeks and plashed into the face of Jesus. But the little boy was undaunted. "Mother, let me look inside the caskets. This is my birthday." In the bareness of a present for him, Mary's heart cried out for a confirmation of the glories that were past. Rising slowly, she tiptoed through the carpenter's shop for fear of waking Joseph. And from the place where she had kept them safely hidden for 7 long years, she brought forth the 3 golden caskets, and with them the little robe which she had woven for him in gold and silvery threads. And there in the shuttered night, with nothing stirring save the distant flocks, and none to watch her save the stars, she put the robe on her little son. How often she had longed to array him in all this splendor. And now, tonight, late though it was, surely God would send some sign to let her know that his angels still kept guard. Trembling, she opened the first casket and brought forth a golden crown and set it upon his forehead. This is for power, my son. And from the second casket she brought forth frankincense and scattered it upon his raiment. This is for worship. But the third casket, which she knew contained myrrh, she would not open. As she watched her little boy standing on the threshold of the carpenter's shop, her thoughts went back to the garden of her childhood and the angel that came to her from out of the sunset. Even though the whole world had grown careless and had forgotten her little son, she could still worship him, falling down upon her knees and throwing her arms around his waist. She began to sing whisperingly her song of thankfulness. My soul doth magnify the Lord my Savior, for he has done great things to me. And while she sang, the little boy lifted his finger to his lips, listening, but saying nothing. And Mary thought that Joseph was stirring, but the sound of a sleeping man fell upon the night air. And then she turned her eyes into the street, and she too heard the sound. It was the thud, thud, thud of a camel, and a voice calling out into the night, Where is he? Where is he? But the sound came no further, for the breath of the rider was sobbing. Through the olive groves Mary saw a dromedary come swaying and staggering from weariness. It was the kind that princes ride when going into Jerusalem. It was caparisoned in purple and gold, but the purple was faded and the gold was tarnished, and around its neck there hung a bell that tinkled. And upon it sat a man who was gaunt and haggard, and his clothes were gray with the dust of travel. Urging his beast forward and casting his eyes from side to side, he called out hoarsely, Where is he? Where is he? As though he were the last survivor of a lost army, with the feeling of defeat clinging to him. Still kneeling beside Jesus, Mary's heart sank within her. All day long she had watched and waited and longed for ambassadors and lords and caravans and angels, for a repetition of that miraculous night in Bethlehem. And now, while the whole world slept, came this fleeing figure of a man like a shadow in the night. He seemed half blind and would have passed by the shop, but Mary rose to her feet, and he halted. Where is he who was born the King of the Jews? Once when I was young, on just such a night as this, we found him. But tonight there's so many stars and not one to guide me. Mary moved out from the shadows and stood beside the camel and looked up into the face of the stranger and whispered, Whence cometh thou? He paused. He gazed at her puzzled, as though her face brought back memories. From the east. We had waited so long. I was young, and Melchior was old, and Balthazar was midway between us. And we set out to find him, following the stars. And when we found him, all the gods of Persia fell upon their faces and worshipped him. But now we've lost him, and the East is beginning to wonder, for the world hath not grown any better. And everything that we thought was real now seems like a dream. And I, because I'm the youngest, of the three kings, and Melchior is dying and longs to know for a certainty. And my faith is the greatest. I've set out to find him. I pray thee, woman, where is he who was born the King of the Jews? If thou wilt help me, I will pay thee. But alas, I can give thee nothing. I've spent my all in searching. But out of the kindness of thy heart, woman, canst thou help me? Mary turned her head and glanced back over her shoulders. The young Lord gropingly descended from the camel, and then his eyes met those of that beautiful child, standing in a halo of moonbeams. Upon his head shone a golden crown. At his feet 3 golden caskets, 2 of them open. The air was filled with the fragrance of frankincense, making the night a temple. It's true. It is true. It wasn't a dream. Running toward the child, he would have fallen upon his face and worshipped. But something stopped him. Was it his own weariness, or was it the loneliness of the childish, kingly figure? Instead, he took the little boy in his arms. The night wore on. The Persian Lord would have gone on and on into the morning, worshiping and adoring the boy Jesus. But Mary reminded him that Melchior was dying. It's a long journey. What can we send him to make him know for sure? They thought of the golden crown, but that was Melchior's gift to the Christ child, and he might have been offended. And the frankincense was all gone, and there was nothing left of any value in the carpenter shop. Quickly the little boy spoke. Let us send him the 3rd casket. It has not been opened. Mary shuddered, for she knew it contained myrrh, which signified death. But the little Jesus freed himself from the arms of the young Lord and brought the casket to him. I will open it and look inside just once, for it was thy gift to me. And as he lifted the lid, a dazzling light burst forth, which blinded all, save Jesus. But Jesus laughed, for instead of the gift that signified death, out from the casket drifted a star. When the young Lord saw it drifting heavenward, he fell upon his knees and cried, "The star we lost, the star." Shop, dimming even the moon by the brightness of its shining, it waited for him to follow. Still holding the hand of Jesus, Mary stood watching him depart. Directly as he mounted the camel, the star began to move slowly eastward, going to bring faith to a dying man. Only once did it stop its heavenly trek, when the young Lord stopped to wave to Mary and Jesus. When the last sound of the hoofbeats of the dromedary died away, they moved back into the dimness of the carpenter shop, and there in the grayness of the morning, Mary slept. The little boy drew her cloak tightly around her shoulders to keep her warm, And then he took the golden crown from his head and put it back in the casket. He took off his royal jacket and put on his sheepskin jacket, for he knew that soon the people of Nazareth would be stirring, and they would wonder to see him thus apparelled. And then he went inside the carpenter's shop, and he said, "Today I'm 7 years old. Am I not almost a man?" And he did something he'd never done before. He took Joseph's tools and began to work on the ox yoke. In the early morning hours when Mary awoke, she thought that she'd been dreaming. But when she went in search of the third casket, she found that it was gone. And while she was still troubled in her spirit, Joseph awaked, and with a loud, glad cry called her to him. Hurrying to the door of the carpenter's shop, she stopped and stood marveling, for there, leaning against the bench, was the ox yoke finished, smooth and perfect. And on the floor, on the bed of shavings, the boy Jesus lay fast asleep. Bending over the childish figure and taking his hands in hers, she saw that they were bruised and bleeding with toil from her. Slowly the tears began to roll down her cheeks, but smiling through those tears, she whispered, "It's true. It is true. It wasn't a dream. He is the Son of God."